Great to be here. I don't know about you, but I feel like this is like a rave where there was like a line outside and we're like in this amazing black room. So hopefully I can pump up the energy a little bit here. So I really had a great time engaging with Newlab in San Francisco. And I really wanted to thank Jack for inviting me here to come to this crowd. There's 900 events for New York Climate Week. I'm losing my voice. I don't normally sound like this. But it's been really incredible just seeing the energy around this. I've been getting like about 20,000 steps, which has been great because I've been eating a lot of carbs, and so it's all good. So as the voice in the ceiling said, I am the Chief Commercialization Officer here at the Department of Energy and the Director of the Office of Technology Transitions, also known as OTT. There's so many acronyms out there that I want you guys to remember us by knowing that we call ourselves the Otters, OTT Otters, and it's the perfect spirit animal because there's these adorable, cute aquatic animals that create tools to help the environment and ecosystem. And as the head of the Otters, that's exactly what I've been doing. DOE was really different when I first joined as a day one Biden-Harris appointee. We were really focused on research and development. And we have 17 amazing national labs that Tony Stark would love to have if he could. There's like just the most incredible technologies. And most of our equities were really around how do we push on these incredible research and development of technologies. But then Uncle Bill, Auntie Ira, and Uncle Chips came along. The Bill, Ira, and Chips did a really powerful set of trifecta of laws that boosted the largest investment in clean energy ever, $500 billion towards clean energy. And our equities then started going to demonstration deployment at the Department of Energy. So when we think about commercialization here, we think about research to development to demonstration to deployment. And then my job started to get really fun because as the Chief Commercialization Officer, what I have to figure out is how do we go from research through this RD&D continuum and get to market as efficiently and as quickly as possible. So if you are someone who's tried to commercialize anything, I wish it was that linear, and we know it's not. It's like a game of chutes and ladders where you think you got to a certain point and then you're like, this is great, and then you realize something doesn't work and it takes you back to the beginning. And so it can be really frustrating, but it's also very rewarding. And what we've really been trying to figure out is how do we help catalyze and put public-private partnerships on steroids? Because yes, $500 billion is enormous amount of money, but it pales in comparison to the $23 trillion that the private sector has. And in the end, it's the private sector that's actually going to be commercializing the technologies. And what we need to do is catalyze the private sector so that we have a government-enabled, private sector-led clean energy transition. So private sector-led, government-enabled. And the really exciting thing is the 3.5 years that we've been here and since the passing of these trifecta of laws, we're actually doing it. For every dollar that we have put out the door, $6 of private capital has come to invest in the clean energy transition, which is amazing. By the end of this year, we will have put the equivalent of 30 Hoover dams of clean energy onto the grid. 30 Hoover dams. Okay, other audiences, I get applause. I don't know what's up with you guys. Thank you, thank you. We also have created 800 new or expanded manufacturing facilities. 400,000 jobs related to clean energy. And one of my favorite points is that 81% of the money that we have put out the door has gone to communities which have a salary below the average Americans. Yes, we are making a difference. Now, as we've been thinking about how to catalyze the ecosystem, one of the things that is really important is that there's not one single organization that actually can do commercialization on their own. We actually all need to band together and do it together. So the question is, how do you do that? How do you get people playing by the same book? Well, when we were trying to do this in the US, when Gordon Moore, the founder of Intel, was trying to double number of transistors on a chip so that we all have supercomputers, and so this guy can take amazing pictures of me with filters that take 10 pounds off. You got that in the writer, right? It was really amazing to try to innovate and get the entire CMOS value chain together so we could innovate together to actually hit Moore's Law. So in order to do this, we have to do something similar, and Semitech had created a commercialization roadmap to do that. So what the friendly auditors at DOE did was we went and we banded with all of our DOE colleagues and said, we need commercialization roadmaps for the critical clean energy technologies. And we created these pathways to commercial liftoff. And what happened was we had all this money that needed to go out the door in a way that could actually de-risk the technology so the private sector could take over. So we knew we had to talk to the private sector and understand what is preventing things from making to market. So what we did was we focused on 4 technologies in the beginning: hydrogen, nuclear, long-duration energy storage, and carbon management, because we had so much money going out the door. And then we created these roadmaps of what the unit cost economics had to be. What are the barriers that are preventing these things from making it to market? And you can now find these reports at liftoff.energy.gov. That's liftoff.energy.gov. And you can actually see what we have to do together to bring virtual power plants, geothermal, and other things to market. Now, the great thing about these reports is they're live on liftoff.energy.gov, meaning we're constantly updating them. And in fact, we'll be sharing some updates on the first wave of the reports. But what it's done is it's given us a language and a clear shared vision of how we have to get there. And I see people taking notes, so that's liftoff.energy.gov. And the really key thing for us is now you know what you need to do. And what we did was we coded the money coming out of DOE to the liftoff reports so that we could jointly start to catalyze the things that have to happen. So I'll give you one example. For hydrogen, the Office of Clean Energy Demonstrations was given $8 billion by Congress in order to catalyze the hydrogen economy. In doing the liftoff work, we saw that one of the biggest challenges for hydrogen, similar to many, many, many technologies, is that it's very difficult for offtake agreements to be signed unless the supply chain is set up. The supply chain is like, we're not setting up until we have offtake agreements. And they look at each other, seeing who's going to move first, and nobody moves. So we're like, well, we're the neighborhood-friendly government, and we heard you guys. So what we did was we reserved $1 billion of the $8 billion to actually do demand-side activation. And that has never been done in the federal government. So the $1 billion is going to help because if you're the first 7 of a kind, you are not yet at cost at scale to actually drive down the cost to the point where you can be selling this profitably. So what we're trying to do in the back end is figure out how do we do contract for differences and other things like that to make sure that people who are brave enough to take those initial risks are actually going to not be losing their shirt as they're doing it. And I think that is really, really, really critical. So, and I think this is, the point is we're trying to innovate how we actually catalyze public-private partnerships. Now, this is great, but most of the people in Newlab are actually eating ramen and trying to figure out how to, get $10,000. So, like $8 billion just seems so far out there. So we've also done a lot, especially here with the auditors, of really catalyzing the startups who are going to be the next public traded companies. So how are we doing that? We are funding, we have funded 80 incubators, accelerators across the nation. In fact, Newlab has gotten $500,000 from OTT. And the reason why we are so excited about the incubators and accelerators is they are the ones that are making sure the next generation of startups have what they need in order to make their technologies, get it further down the commercialization continuum. And so we're super excited to be able to support amazing spaces like this. And the fact that there's a 1,000-person wait list, people are understanding why these kinds of places are so important. The second thing that we did was we really wanted to make sure that companies, large and small, understood actually what it takes to commercialize. Raise your hand if you've heard of technology readiness levels. Okay, for those of you by camera, most hands are up. Technology readiness levels were invented by NASA in the 1970s to launch rockets to the moon. When you're trying to launch a rocket to the moon, you don't need a permit yet to land on the moon. You don't care about the unit economics, and you're not trying to create a lot of rockets. So as a result, when we use TRLs as a proxy that a technology is ready for market, we're missing all the things like permitting, siting, workforce, supply chain, demand activation, things that TRLs don't cover. So here we created a very helpful tool from the auditors called the Adoption Readiness Levels, ARLs, which is a complement to TRLs. And what it does is it really teaches founders especially. I have a PhD, and PhDs are actually anti-commercialization because we are told, don't talk to me about your research because you have to publish first. You join a research group where everyone focuses on the same technology. In my case, it was block copolymers. And so my PhD advisor minted 30 years of PhDs on block copolymers. And then the very last thing you do is you stand up in front of a thesis committee wearing your Wonder Woman handcuff stuff to basically block off questions and say why you're the smartest person in the room because you're defending your PhD. Now, if you told a entrepreneur, don't talk to anyone about your work, be defensive about any question that you're asked, and only focus on one technology because that thing's going to solve the world, you will not get anywhere. So yes, applause. I really like you. Come on, guys, applause. I guess you have the war wounds from that too. So we created ARLs as the language to teach people about commercialization. That's a complement to TRLs. And it's really important that people, especially PhD founders, understand there's so much more besides technology that we have to address. Now that they've got this, like, okay, great, I've got the language of ARLs, but I don't know how to do techno-economic analysis. I don't know how to do any of this stuff. And so we're like, okay, we need to help you guys with that because you're not going to get it, from the trainings that you got in academia. So how do you find people that can help you with this? Well, if you're planning a wedding or trying to do something, you go to Google or Yelp and you see who has 5-star reviews. You can't do this techno-economic analysis. So what we did at OTT was we innovated a program where we actually have found and have over 100 organizations that can actually support things like techno-economic analysis, community engagement, and so forth. And we know that startups don't have time to go through 120-page FOAs, funding opportunity announcements, to actually get the money, especially if the money is a low amount. So we created a voucher program, which actually is live now. The deadline's October 3rd. And we provide up to $250,000 for you to be matched up with a third-party organization that can do things like techno-economic analysis, standardization, and qualifications, and so forth. So all you need to do is apply to the voucher program. We then give the money to the third party, and then you just call the third party. There's no negotiation needed. There's nothing. We're trying to make it as easy as possible for startups and small organizations to also get access to the dollars coming out the door. I'm really proud of this program because 80% of the people who have received a voucher have never gotten money from the Department of Energy. So, round of applause. So I think that's really key. So for all of you startups up there, please go to the opportunity right now that's there. And in fact, 8 of our national labs, which are amazing, are voucher providers. So you can actually get a chance to work with the national labs as well. Now, for those of you who are writing checks, raise your hand here if you're like an investor. Raise your hand high so all the startups can see you and actually come accost you later. The thing I'm going to talk to all of you guys about is that when you're trying to go through the RD&D continuum, the risks are very high. And you cannot be looking at hurdle rates that are ones that are what we normally think about with more traditional capital projects. And we have to be innovating on risk and the amount of risk we're willing to take. So right now we're first in line to be 8th, 9th, or 10th across the Squid Game bridge, right? We don't want to be first, second, or third. We want other people to take those steps because the first of a kind, second of a kind, third of a kind is very risky because it's not yet at scale. So we have to figure out how do we worry about the first 10 of a kind. So instead of a FOAC, we have to be thinking about TOAC, right? TOAC. So we need to think about funding in a way that we actually can scale and get to that tipping point. So for all of you who are investors, I really think we have to disrupt how we think about funding these first ones, because then we can get to the cost curve and the tipping point that we lay out in the Pathways to Commercial Liftoff. And so I think really what I'm hoping you guys do in the last day and a half of New York Climate Week is think creatively and to innovate in your own ecosystem. If we can innovate here in the federal government, you guys can innovate too. It really is possible. And I really encourage you guys to think more creatively about how do we move faster, because right now we are all like seniors in high school who have a project to do. And yes, we had many years ago, many years, and now as the time, clicks down, we haven't started yet, we have less time to do the exact same thing. And we're starting to run out of time, and we're about to get an F from the next generation if we don't move now. So everybody, please, please, please think creatively and think about how do you innovate in the ecosystem so that we can all drive forward together. Thank you.